Hello and welcome. Please enjoy this short readiness video on Azure Database for PostgreSQL. Hi Umur, how are you doing today?
Hi Sanjay, great. How are you?
Great to have you back again with us.
Awesome, it's good to be back.
All right, let's start with your introduction for those of you who are tuned in new today.
Of course, I head up our Postgres product team at Azure, and prior to that I was the CEO at Citus Data, which is now part of Microsoft as of earlier this year.
Fantastic. And Nikhil, I know you'll be showing us a demo later on, so can you please introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, Sanjay, how are you doing?
Great.
I run the engineering team for Hyperscale Postgres data services on Azure Arc.
Fantastic. You make the magic happen behind the scenes.
We do. We try to.
Awesome, awesome. So let's get started, Umur. So what are you going to talk about today?
So Sanjay, I'll hit a few topics. First, Azure Arc, which we announced just last month at the Ignite,
Yes.
ability to bring Azure data services anywhere. Something we're super excited about. It's not yet in production, it's in preview or early access program, but we want to look a bit under the hood, kind of show you how it works, and then look at some core data services that are running on top of that, specifically Postgres, and then a unique, scalable approach to that, which is Hyperscale Citus. And then Nikhil will dive in and do a demo looking into how it works.
I really enjoyed that Ignite keynote where they showed Azure Data Services with Azure Arc. So let's see that in action.
Yeah.
What are you going to talk about on that one?
Let's do. So first off, what is Azure Arc, right? So it really is a set of technologies that extends Azure management capabilities, data services capabilities to other environments that are not Azure. That could be your data center, right? It could be on-premises, or it could be other cloud providers. And if you think about it, it allows you to bring cloud practices that you hopefully like to on-premises. And if I actually look into what those practices are, what Azure Arc can allow you to do, it really gives you a unified management, a view, a single pane, if you will, of your instances to look at and to manage, right? Mm-hmm. And part of that management is security, being able to, for example, have your Azure policies and have them apply to your on-premise assets, right? And now, when you look into what data services are, we have very popular services like Azure Database for Postgres or SQL Managed Instance, right? Yes. Which are available on Azure, and now we're bringing capabilities that are similar to those to on-prem environments.
I see.
And what do those do? Simple examples, right? It'll allow you to upgrade your database, the patching automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. What that means is you stay always current. For example, you can take your backups. You can rest assured that all of this is taken care of you or your databases through this infrastructure.
So all the best practice of the cloud also now available in a way of
exactly.
On-prem.
And that includes provisioning instances, scaling them, or even cloud billing, right? Pay-as-you-go type of consumption is available with Azure Data Services.
Fantastic, best of both worlds.
Exactly. Now,
the architecture.
Architecture, exactly. Looking kind of under the hood on how this works.
Yes.
Right. So this. When we say any infrastructure, that means literally, any hardware that you have on your premises. There's a virtualization layer, VMs. I'll talk about storage just a bit later, but really rely on Kubernetes to do the orchestration, right? So and that Kubernetes could be one that you're managing, yourself as part of your company or wherever, or it could be you could be using Azure Kubernetes service, or you could be using any of the, whether it's GCP or like Amazon, any Kubernetes service. That's basically what you need. And then the other thing that you need, which again comes with it, is a layer of persistent storage that again Kubernetes will have access to and will be able to store that data. Now that kind of as the underlying substrate, then you'll have your data services on top. Postgres, which we'll talk about kind of at length, and PostgreSQL Hyperscale is here, as well as SQL instances, right? You could have one of them, you could have many of them for different applications, you could have copies for high availability and so forth, and other data services will become available over time. Right now, it's Postgres and SQL.
I see, so analytics is coming.
That's coming, right, exactly. And again, this is, we'll dive into it a bit more. The way we access these resources is through a powerful CLI, a command line interface, which is called AZ data, right? And that's basically what calls the RESTful APIs, and it allows you to, for example, monitor all of your instances, and then you can get that single view, single pane of glass, on Azure Portal, for example. Or in fact, you could use Azure Data Studio as well, if you're not connected to Azure at that point to manage those instances.
I see.
So that's kind of what's under the hood.
I see. So can you just a little bit talk more about this PostgreSQL, why, and the Hyperscale especially?
Of course. Let's actually dive into that in terms of the data services available and what like Postgres does. And in fact, if I could spend just a minute on what some of these management capabilities mean, I'll give a few examples. Once we have this infrastructure in place, what you're doing is provision, and that again the CLI will take care of all of that for you. It'll be able to add new instances as you need them. Very useful actually is integrating this into your flow, right? Your development flow through CI/CD like pipelines. In other words, let's say you want to create a new database. In some cases, it could take days on an on-prem environment, sometimes more than a week, to provision an instance, make sure that it's secure, that gets handed off. There are multiple tickets that get handed over. In this case, you just call what you would do in the cloud, which is get an instance in a few seconds, right?
I see.
And backup, restore, all that goodness. I want to give an example of what this kind of control plane layer, which is the Azure Arc for Data Services, does, using high availability as an example.
Yes,
this is like some of the things that we're working towards making available, like later on. But essentially, you have your pods that in Kubernetes, and you have these instances that you've created. Then we'll actually create replicas that could be synchronous, that could be asynchronous, but all of that is managed for you and abstracted away. So you see just an endpoint, you connect to it.
So you're talking about a scenario, for example, for a retail store, they may have some, regions in US, but also there's something in Europe. You can do
correct. You can make sure that the data is replicated. You can take your kind of backups locally, or you can take them to kind of an Azure region, right? And that just gives you a lot of flexibility to be hybrid, really, both on and off-prem.
Okay.
Right.
Sounds good.
All right. Now, to your question of, hey, like why looking at Postgres, there's many reasons, but I'll talk about just 3 of them, which makes Postgres really popular and ubiquitous, that it is open source. It's a long-standing project with a huge developer community around it, all the tooling. We'll touch upon some of those, but really, a reputation for resilience and a reputation for keeping data integrity. That's something Postgres is very well known for and is a core pillar of why people love Postgres. And last, certainly not least, is its rich feature set. Whether it's ANSI SQL features, whether it's all the performance indexing data types, whether it's JSON or PostGIS, makes Postgres a very kind of complete package. And we make that even further by introducing Hyperscale Citus. Right? We talked about that briefly, and that there's other sessions coming up, so I'll just touch upon it very lightly. But it allows you really to take any number of Postgres instances, could be a couple of them, could be 10, could be 100 of them, and have that behave as a single Postgres to the application. It gives you as simple as taking a slider, dragging it, and as much resources as you like. You could have terabytes of memory, thousands of cores at your fingertips, literally, like within minutes when you provision.
Of course.
And when we put all of this together actually on Azure, it actually gives a very compelling picture on why Postgres and why on Azure, right? So we talked about those 3 core pillars of open source, proven resilience, and the rich feature set, but we make it really scalable with Hyperscale Citus, add nodes anytime without downtime, and Nikhil is going to talk about that later on. And then we bring these cloud management capabilities really anywhere. Right? Not just like on Azure. So we talked about any scale. Now we're talking about anywhere. And that's a very compelling open source Postgres experience. Both the community version that we're running and the Hyperscale Citus extension, they're all open and brings the picture together.
And then on top of it, your amazing Power BI.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding that. That's, in fact, this is all integrated into the Azure ecosystem, right? Like whether it's Power BI to run reports on it, whether it's Azure Data Studio to access that, the tools that you're familiar with are at your disposal.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. All right. With that, I'll hand it over to Nikhil to dive into the demo.
Yes.
Thank you, Umur. Thank you, Sanjay. So I'm going to do a quick tour of what we have in terms of Azure Data Services running, and there's an early access program that people can sign up for.
Okay, cool.
So here you see, here what I have is an Arc data service Hyperscale Citus instance deployed in Azure.
How do people get to this? Portal.azure.com, and
Yes,
what do they search for?
portal.azure.com, and you just search for Azure Arc, and you get the ability to start doing this.
Thank you.
Here you can see the familiar view of essentials, essential information like in any other Azure services about resource group. Here's my location, which happens to be on-prem. I have deployed a 4-node Hyperscale Citus cluster, and here, as Umur was saying, you can easily configure it in terms of the number of nodes, the scale you want, the cores you want, the storage you want. As you move the slider.
That's the slider he was talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
You can change the number of cores, and this all happens on your cluster, where we can dynamically change the allocations. You save it.
There's a lot of magic that happens when you drag that slider. Yes. All of that orchestration kind of bears up to being.
So now, how about we jump in and connect to a cluster that's deployed on-prem and start playing with this.
Absolutely.
So here, let's go talk about AZ Data CLI that is available for you to go and manage your cluster and scale and do things. So here, if I do AZ Data, you get the familiar way of all the context around what it can do. You can see you can deploy Postgres and SQL data services. Here, as Umur was saying, we can talk about what capabilities we have when you create a Postgres server. Here, you can configure all the things that you want, the memory, the backup intervals, the backup intervals, the CPU, all the kinds of things that you saw in the portal are available for you to do here. It's got integrated monitoring. So let's go and connect with So here you see that I have the Arc Postgres that we saw in portal running. Up here, it is up and running, and I can go and show some more data. So here, what it's doing is it's asking me what cluster I want to connect to.
Mm-hmm. So this particular instance is on-prem, or is it?
Exactly, it's running on-prem.
It's running on-prem. Here you can see that I am able to, here's a neat command line screen that I can connect with, and I can show you the actual Postgres, the cluster, and data about the cluster.
Sure.
And again, this is all the kind of familiar interfaces. We'll kind of use pSQL standard way to
as you can see here, I can connect, and it's connected. I can run. And you can see that it's a 4-node cluster connected, and I can do all kinds of administration on this cluster. Absolutely. So here, I can do things like I can do an online scale out. Let's just see that. How about?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is basically like adding new nodes to the cluster.
I see.
That's like through that command, it'll instantiate new instances, it'll start moving the data, and then
so more customers coming into the stores in retail example, and now you want to have more,
Exactly. This is really kind of like the promise of the cloud, right? That I can add any instances elastically.
I see.
And what's really cool is as I add new nodes, my system still stays up. That my queries are up, my reads are up, my writes are up, and
business is on.
Business is on. Exactly. Exactly.
Here's the thing I can do quickly. I can talk about the monitoring that we have integrated with the cluster that customers are familiar and can use. So here, the 4-node cluster is being monitored on-prem with all the metrics that one is used to in terms of CPU, memory, the databases, deadlocks, conflicts, all of these things that you're used to. So when you deploy and manage these things on-prem, you get a cloud-like experience in terms of managing, deploying, backing up, and monitoring.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts?
This is something we're really excited about. It's very much in the works. Again, it's an early access program, so if you're interested, please sign up.
How do we sign up?
If we go back to the presentation, I think there should be this is the link.
Okay.
But if you search for Azure Arc, it is, and then sign up there. We love your input. This is work in progress. And then as it gets continually more features, better. Love to hear what you can do with it.
Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this short Azure Readiness video.